Clint, we keep hearing and reading that the motion picture industry as we once knew it is dying or dead. Is it dying or dead?
I don't think so, no, because just when everybody pronounces it dying or dead, there's always a couple hits that come out of the woodwork. I don't think it's dying or dead. I think that there's been a slight amount of insanity in the past few years. It seems to go in waves. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, they went in waves. One hit picture comes out like The Sound of Music, where it makes an enormous amount of money at the box office, but it costs a fairly reasonable fee to do, and then everybody starts figuring, well, we're going to do big budget things now, and they keep expanding. In fact, I was in one, the Paint Your Wagon, which in those days cost around $22 million, I think, and that was like the 40s are now, and I think it was insane then, and I think it was the reason I started my own company, and it's insane now. Now it's even more difficult because the financing of films is so, not only the cost doubled, but the interest rates are so enormous. Most films are financed through banks, and the banks charge a studio 1.5 over prime. In those days, the prime rate was maybe 8%, and now it's 20% prime and 1.5 over that, so you get talking about 21.5% interest rates, and it's just absolutely insane because you make a picture for these tremendous sums that we read about all the time, 30 million and up. You're talking about $6 to $8 million in interest a year, which could come out to anywhere from $15,000–17,000 a day. And so no matter how much your picture is making out there, how it's doing at the box office, it's never really getting ahead of all this, the interest and all the prints and advertising, everything that's leaned against it. So every time you make these giant budget films, you're cutting the odds of, you're putting the odds of having to be one of the top 5 films ever made just to break even, much less get into a profit situation.
Is there one particular person, one particular element, one particular group, one particular anything responsible for the state of the industry today?
I don't think there's any one group. I just think that nobody manages the industry anymore or manages their pictures anymore. It seems like, this is very general. That doesn't go for just absolutely every project being made, because I'm sure there are some that are well controlled, but it seems like a person makes one picture and all of a sudden everybody says, here's the dough, go make another. They don't take into consideration there's got to be management. In the old days of Harry Cohn, Jack Warner, Zanuck, all those studio heads, they knew a little bit about picture making. They might not have been able to shoot films themselves, come down the set and actually kind of whip scenes together, but they knew a little bit about what was going on, and they knew when their coats were being pulled.
We hear a great deal about the deal. In my own reports, I have talked about the deal you have just seen up on the screen. We hear a great deal from the studio executives who say, the only way you can have a deal is bring me the head of Robert Redford, Barbra Streisand, Clint Eastwood. Is the industry superstar crazy?
Well, that is one of the ways they finance films. Yeah, a lot of times they can finance it through the package, the names of the actors, and the combination, who's directing, etc. But that isn't always the case, as we know. To make a hit movie, you have to have the right story, the right element, and it has to hit the public just right. There are those actors may be able to get the people going initially, but if the film isn't there, if it isn't a good movie, it doesn't make any difference who's in it. It's not going to go anywhere.
What about the large salaries from 4 stars? I know you often take less money than most of them. You get a percentage of your films. Do you feel anyone is really worth $3, $4, $5 million?
I don't know if anybody's what anybody's worth, really. I suppose if they raise this money based on that particular name, it's what the name figures he can command. It sort of puts he or she in the driver's seat. But I don't know. It's hard to tell what the prices are. Every one of these studios in town has 5 or 6 or maybe more vice presidents that are in 6-figure salaries, and yet they can't seem to be able to tell a director that he's going over budget and it's time to either shape up or get off the show. So who's running the deal? If some of these guys are worth a 6-figure salary, then I guess Barbra Streisand's worth $10 million. I don't know. It just depends on the management thing.
Do you?
It depends, and it depends on what that particular personality brings. If the story has suits them and everything, I don't know. If the picture makes $40 million, then film rental, or $50 million film rental, then everybody's a hero. And if it doesn't, everybody guessed wrong.
Do you think those astronomical salaries are good for the industry? Isn't the public the one who eventually pays for those large salaries?
Yeah, well, actually, the cost of movies, and going back to this, what I was talking about earlier on interest rates and everything, and then plus every movie, every budget you hear about that costs, if a picture costs $20 million, you have to spend 10 for prints and advertising, so that makes it $30 million, and interest, that makes it $38 million, and you go on and on like that. It hasn't been pushed off on the public as much as it has been on the industry. I think that's the reason it's such a long shot making films of these astronomical prices, because the ticket prices, they'd have to be $20 a ticket to have any kind of an odds the way these people are going. But as far as the high prices go, I don't know. It just depends. I've always worked, my first film that I directed, Play Misty for Me, they didn't want to give me any salary, so I said, okay, I won't take any salary. I'll just give me a percentage of the film. The picture did well. I ended up doing better than I would have if they'd given me what the going rate was at that time. And it worked out, and for many years I did that. And now I find a balance in between there. So.
Has America lost the movie-going habit?
They lose it. They don't lose it all the time, because there's some movies that have done quite well out there in the last few years. But they're just being more selective. You cannot give the people what they're getting nightly on the tube. You just cannot give it to them in a theater and expect them to go see it. Why should they? They're getting a tremendous amount of variety of stories. Maybe they're not a variety of stories. Maybe there's an awful lot of sameness in the television series angle too. But there's movies of the week. There's good older movies being shown on television. There's cable television. To do movies, you have to think. You have to do a kind of a special thing. To ask people to leave their homes and pay to stand in line or whatever.
I mean, obviously you can see movies at home in your own private projection room, but do you go to the movies?
Well, I go to I don't see that many movies in projection rooms. I usually go with my kids. I usually go to the theater and pay for the ticket and go see it. That way I get a much better idea of what the public's feeling about movies, and a much better an idea. Sort of through them, I get a feeling of how they respond as well as how I respond as a different age group.
What do you take them to see, or what do you want to see?
Well, I like all kinds. I try to recommend them to see all kinds of things. Right now, my son happens to be nuts about, he loves horror movies and all that kind of stuff. But he likes good films too, and he likes, he gets a wide variety. I don't know exactly an example. I can't think of. But do you want to know specific titles?
Yes, I was just what kind of a film you
Well, the other night we went to see Excalibur. Now, the kids have missed the whole generation we grew up with, where we had King Arthur legend type movies, and this was kind of a new thing for them. It was fun watching them see that particular legend told in a new type way. I think the popularity of the game Dungeons and Dragons across the country, which is they're absolutely obsessed with, might have had something to do with it. All of a sudden they see these characters come to life in this kind of a presentation. But that was the last one we went to. I suppose we'll go see The Outland tonight.
Just out of curiosity, does your son recognize the fact that the Excalibur picture, the legend of Arthur, isn't exactly the legend as you and I were taught the legend?
Oh yeah, because both my daughter and son have seen the Earl Flynn and various ones we grew up with on TV. But they understand the new approach to it and enjoy it.
People say the future in entertainment, in films, is pay TV. Do you see the day coming when you will make your services available exclusively for that market?
I don't know. I hate to predict that. I think it could possibly come to that. I think there's always going to be some reason for people to go out, and I think people want to go out now and then, go out and attend some sort of function. I think attending a movie with other people can be a pleasant experience. But I think pay TV will be the ultimate kind of convenience because of being able to watch it in the living room for people who have families and so forth and can't always afford babysitters or the inconvenience of trying to locate somebody to take care of that or the parking, all the other situations you have to go through. Pay TV might be it, but I still think there'll always be room for theatrically exhibited films because you get a chance to go out, maybe have a beer afterwards or a soda or whatever kind of an evening it is.
As a producer, you have kept your budgets in line, but I hear people complain right and left that what's killing the industry is craft unioning, feather bedding, and outrageous demands. Do you agree?
Well, that doesn't have anything to do with the movie industry. That has to do with probably every industry is always trying to. The way our inflation has gone, the way the structure of our country has gone, especially in recent years, everybody is just fighting desperately to keep up with the diminishing value of the dollar. And I think inflation has run so rampant in this country that people are always hoping to get in that position where they say, gee, now I'm a little bit ahead. I can put a few bucks in the bank now. Well, you never can because as fast as you get a little bit ahead and as fast as the union negotiates a new deal, the dollar's diminished against it and the inflation rate has eaten that away. So Mr. and Mrs. Middle America, who have taken the brunt of taxation for so long, have somewhat revolted in the last year or so, and I think that's beginning to show up in our political structure, where every politician in the world is now all of a sudden a fiscal austerity type guy. People that never even spoke that way in the past are all of a sudden getting on the bandwagon, and I think it's because the public's getting tired of that. And once the public gets tired of that, and once the people aren't taxed to death, then maybe our whole nation can fall back into a somewhat sane area where unions won't demand so much because everybody's not fighting to get ahead of this inflation rate at 18% or whatever it becomes.
However, here in the entertainment industry, especially in the film business, we hear producers daily, we even hear executives say, if I could only cut some of my union costs, I could make this picture for 30% less, 40% less. If there was to be a big budgeted film that now goes for $30 million, and there are people who say they could make it for 15 if they didn't have the unions on their back. This doesn't mean slave labor. I'm not talking about that. I mean, wouldn't you say that unions to some degree are contributing to the inflationary spiraling costs here?
I think they're contributing, but I think they're getting unjust blame for the thing. I think a lot of it just goes to poor management. The most famous film the last year for being poorly managed was not the union's fault. It starts at the top, and I think that the directors and producers have to set an example of austerity or practicality, if that's the word, as far as or they're just never going to get the thing back in line again. It's easy to blame the unions and say, and sure, some of them do. They say, well, you have to take on one driver to sit around all day or something down the line, or they complain. But this is really not solving the problem. I think the problem starts right from the top, and just allowing spinning to go rampant, saying, well, if you don't watch this dime, it's a few extra dollars, but so what? And they just go on and on and on like that. I think I think the unions would cooperate if they could see some light that there was going to be some intelligence run from the very top. I'd hate to think they wouldn't. I'd like to be that kind of optimistic and think that they would go along, but they don't see that, and there's no reason for anybody to say, well, if this industry wants to just blow a dough like that, why should I work cheap? Well, some exec is out at his beach home figuring out how to spend quadruple the budget, or he's not watching the store and he's letting the director spend $10 million more than we planned on it. Well, why should the union guy sit there and say, well, gee, I'll cut my salary in half? I mean, I'm just trying to be the devil's advocate in the thing. It's true, there is such a thing as feather bedding. There isn't, and there has been in the business for some time. I've watched it in every country in the world, England especially, and though England's taken a reversal now, they're changing now because of the drastic recession they've had. That they're changing. Unions are starting to think, well, they're going to have to be cooperative, or else there's just no pictures being made. So they'll have to go into some other craft, and we're going to do that here too eventually.
Listening to you speak, do you have any real respect for the men and women who run our industry, mainly the studios today? You work with them on almost every level.
I have respect on an individual basis, but I think there is generally, if you ask me to make a general statement, I think the leadership at the top doesn't know as much about the business as the leadership at the top of this industry did in past years. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the Jack Warners and Harry Cohns of the world, the Daryl Zanucks of the world would shudder at some of the runaway spending that's gone on in some of the recent productions. And I think they wouldn't have stood for it, because I think, though they weren't filmmakers themselves, they could see the handwriting when somebody was insecure and didn't know what they were doing.
Obviously, you're referring to Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate, when you talk about somebody wasn't there in management to say, wait a minute, Michael, stop.
Well, I did a film with Michael Cimino. I did his first film, and it came in under budget and under schedule. It was a good film, I think, and I thought Mike did a terrific job with it, both writing the picture and directing it. But we did manage the project for him. He wasn't allowed to go crazy. He'd only made 2 films before he made Heaven's Gate. Why should people expect him to be a great financial genius? And if he was going off the deep end, which obviously was the case, somebody should have come on the set and said, "You're going off the deep end, kid, and shape up, or we'll replace you." And that's what I'd have said to him, and he knows that. That's why he did it on schedule, on budget for me. Obviously, somewhere in his subconscious mind, he knew that nobody was going to say that to him.
Has anybody ever said that to you?
No, because I take more care. I have respect for the financier, and I take more care of his money than he does.
Man really understands money.
Yeah, I think that's...
I mean, when it comes to actors, excuse me, I don't mean to make that kind of a generalized remark, but it's true.
Well, I think that, though, I think that's probably a misconception, and that actors don't know anything about dough, and maybe some of them don't. Maybe because people figured, why should they? They're there to perform a certain function, and why should they sit there and they're not bankers? But I think that people who direct films, who know what it takes to finance film, know what it takes to make money with films, just can't help but be conscious of this. It takes a certain amount of years in grade, like it does any business, to learn how to operate it. But I think it works for you, and a lot of actors who are going into directing have been in a lot of pictures, and they've seen a lot of different situations, and if they've absorbed well, there's no reason why they shouldn't be as good or better than anybody else at it.
Management says that strikes from actors, writers, and directors are killing this business. Do you agree?
Well, of course, management now is has been plagued with strikes this year on the Screen Actors Guild, and now with the writers and directors. That is probably jockeying for position, for negotiating position, and I think that that management might not feel that way after the strikes are settled. I don't know what's killing the business. I don't think anything is killing. It's definitely a lull right now, but the whole economy has been a lull, and I think it takes. Movies sometimes are slower to react to a recession, and then they're also slower to get back in when recession ends up and eases up. I think I think strikes do hurt the industry, but I think and some of the demands that people ask for sometimes seem silly, but that's all seems to be negotiating posture. You ask for the moon, you ask, gee, can I have my birthday off? And I'd like Boxing Day because I'm half British, and then I'd like Yom Kippur because I'm half Jewish, and I want Christmas and my day before Christmas and the day, and you start it, but it's all kind of negotiating, because then they negotiate back to where they just normally have Christmas off like they always did.
Clint, you've been in some of the industry's most successful films. How much clout has that given you in terms of what you want, what you're able to do?
It gives you good clout. I think your track record, your overall, your performance over the long haul is what really gives you the most clout. You can have, though sometimes a person will have a smash one picture and then everybody say, yeah, and they jump on the bandwagon and then they're disappointed the next. We see it all the time. You see people have one show and the next picture they quadruple the costs and it doesn't perform that way. But I think it gives me enough clout. I have a reputation for trying to be reasonable. I've had a chance to do some films that would have been very, very costly, and I've tried to avoid that as much as I would have maybe liked to have stretched out and tried a project. But you have to have a certain amount of practical mind. When I do a stretch kind of project, I try to make it one that is reasonable, so that the film has a chance of coming out, so that nobody takes a real bath with it.
Did the box office failure, and I'm not quite sure it was really a failure, of Bronco Billy diminish the clout?
No, not at all. Actually, Bronco Billy wasn't a failure. The only thing it was a failure in is that everybody was hoping it would
be $100 million grosser,
yeah,
right?
everybody was hoping that it would do the business of the prior film that I had out, Every Which Way But Loose. But it wasn't intended to do that. It wasn't intended to be for the same audience even. It was intended to be another type of film, and it had a 15, to this point has had a $15 million film rental domestically, and has had some very good foreign business, and that isn't bad when you consider the film cost $5 to make. If it had cost 10 or 15 to make, then it might be considered a box office failure. But it wasn't intended to be a big. It was just something I wanted to do. It was a story I wanted to do. There was a certain purity about it that I liked, and, as a script.
Are you at the mercy of your audience?
I think everybody is. Yeah, I think if your audience gets fickle and decides they can pass on you, then you're at the mercy of them. Sure, because the studios are all run by people who are saying what's happening now. If you're not happening, you can be. It's a feast or famine business. It was in the beginning when I first met you. When I was an unknown actor, you were an unknown journalist, and we were all both sitting around wondering
Where we were
what was
going.
going to happen. What was going to happen to us? But then all of a sudden you hit a home run and everything's fine for a while. But you always have to remember that you might have to settle for a one base hit now and then. Yeah.
The media often writes about a Clint Eastwood film. Executives talk about a Clint Eastwood films. Do you know what they mean when they say a Clint Eastwood film?
They mean a film with Clint Eastwood in it, I suppose. It's Yeah, they just mean a film that I'm playing the protagonist in.
That's it, the protagonist, basically.
I think so. Maybe I've had some films where I've stamped the character fairly hard, and it becomes a sort of mine. But I can't think of any. I'm not objective about any of that sort of thing. To me, it's a film that I'm in.
It seems to me that people want to see you doing away with the real bad guy, that in any other kind of film, if you walk the fine line, they say, that's not my Clint. I think that's what maybe they're referring to as a Clint Eastwood film. When you take a very definite stand, you wipe out bad.
Well, I think everybody fantasizes that they could be the ultimate individual, and some of the characters I've played in films have been very individualistic. And in a society today where there's a tremendous lack of that, and it's not conducive to be that way because it's such a regimented society, or so I think that is a dream character. It's a very escapist kind of thing. People enjoy that. They go to the theater and drown out the fact that they go to work and assemble parts all day and do kind of a thing that might seem routine to them.
After a Bronco Billy, do the executives here at Warner Brothers, or if you were making a film at Paramount, or wherever it might be, would they say to you, Clint, do it our way? I mean, give us the Clint Eastwood that will bring us $100 million to the box office or better. I mean, do they stop you a little bit to the type of film that you want to do? I mean, Bronco Billy, as we know, was a different kind of film from the kind of films that you had been making. You say it's really not a failure. It will certainly make money.
Yeah, well, when I quote 15, I'm talking about film rental, which is
well, I
Film
know it's
Rental
nothing to do with
Studios.
probably 30 million
The
at the
box
box
office.
office or whatever, which is certainly not
A lot of
chicken
times
liver.
people in the trades and people outside the business don't realize that when people are quoting box office, they're not quoting the actual income to the studio. It's just that there's a big difference between film rental and box office, and when people want to sound impressive, sometimes they'll drop the box office rate out, but when they want to be realistic, they'll drop the film rental base out. But I don't know, what was that?
The question are studio executives now saying to you, after a Bronco Billy, Clint, you have what you want as long as you deliver us a specific kind of a film?
I don't think so, because they knew what I was trying to do there. They liked the film very much. The film got very well received throughout the world, probably as well as any picture I've done in recent years. Maybe outside of The Outlaw Josie Wales, they had the best notices of any film I've done, and it found a certain audience. They would have liked it to have been much more. The next film after that, Any Which Way You Can, has done extremely well, and they're not complaining at all. Before the films prior to that, they're not complaining either, because they know that it's not like I want to do 10 films that are all. I'll still do the escapist entertainment films.
Well, you're going back to that right now, your next film, right?
Probably for a few films, I'll have a couple things like that.
I was curious, because the public did not support Bronco Billy in the way that they supported some of your other films, does that now make you kind of concerned and a little leery, and therefore you don't want to experiment and stretch?
No. I've got to keep experimenting and stretching. Otherwise, there's no. It would be a shame not to at this point in life. I remember years ago when I did The Beguiled. It was a film that was really a disaster. It didn't do any business at all, but it got tremendous. Life magazine did a big cover story on it, and a lot of attention in the media and stuff. But it wasn't a very successful film, partly because it was sold as a Clint Eastwood action film, and it wasn't really that. It never really found its audience, and that was. I always thought it was due to bad promotion, and it could have been a factor, but it might have never hit it. It just But it was a great experiment. It was great for me personally, and I don't regret it for a second. I don't regret Bronco Billy for a second. I personally enjoyed making the film and liked the work. I don't know what I'd do any different. We shot it. If I was doing it today, I'd do the same thing. But that doesn't preclude me from doing the action films that people enjoy too.
You deal with the front office executives. How willing are they to take risks?
Well, I think sometimes, judging by some of the risks the industry's been taking the last few years, they've been taking enormous risks. Sometimes, maybe not knowingly, but they take risks they definitely shouldn't be taking. But I think they're willing to go along. They're willing to go along if they think you can do the job for them. Like I said before, most of them don't know that much about making films, so they're very dependent on the people who come in and make them for them. If the people who come in and make them for them are very, very in control of things, then everything comes out fine. If they're not, they just seem to get lost in the runaway. In the old days, John Ford made pictures exposing 40,000 feet of film, and nowadays they do 2 million. It's just insanity. There are some good little films that are made, though. This Breaker Morant was as nice told more about war than any of these great big conspicuous stories we've seen lately. And
but that wasn't American.
It cost $800,000.
But that wasn't American.
It doesn't make a difference. It's still film, though. It's making film, and it was a guy who knew what he wanted to do, and he told it right. Sure, it would have cost more to do here, but it was a nicely told tale. It could have been done reasonable here too.
Well, that of course gets back to what I originally said. It seems that most of the executives, because they do not know what they're really doing, are dependent on names such as yours and Streisand and Redford and Newman and Reynolds, etc. And that if a little guy were to come in today who might be a wonderful actor, does he really have a chance to get a film made?
I think that he's got to score up the line first. What happens is he's got to the little guy you're talking about has to make a hit in a certain kind of movie. And I did three films that were money-making films before I even got an offer from an American film company. But they were made in Europe. They were Western films made in Europe, and they were looked down upon. I was a television actor that was also looked down upon. It took a while for people to say, wait a minute, maybe this guy might have something going for him. I don't know. Then I made a few American films that weren't any better than the Italian-made films. They just happened to be made on American soil, and then people started thinking, well, he's an American actor, isn't he? So you just kind of have to work your way up the line, and then you take advantage of all the breaks that are presented to you.
How important is publicity in the selling of film?
Well, I think it's important. Advertising costs and publicity are tremendous now, especially, but I think a film has to have a look in its ads and presentation as well as it does in its own entity.
How do you feel about people at the studios selling films in a deceiving manner? In other words, trying to sell at one point Bronco Billy as if it was every which way but loose.
That doesn't work. It never works. I know they do it occasionally, and that the Beguile in my case was the prime example of that. And you can't do that because then you attract the people who want to see that kind of movie, and they get in, they're disappointed, and the people who might have wanted to see the movie are turned off because of the advertising. You cannot lie to them. You can't lie to the public any more than you can play down to them. I think you have to play whatever subject matter you're playing straight across, and allow them to participate with you imaginatively and creatively. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.